cold December night, the quiet town of Lurgan, Northern Ireland, became the scene of an unthinkable crime. A young woman, full of life and expecting a child, was found brutally murdered in her own home. The case would soon unravel a web of deception, digital manipulation, and a killer who almost got away with it. This is the story of Natalie McNally, a case where the line between truth and lies blurred into the pixels of a virtual alibi. Wei Chiju was Natalie McNally. Natalie McNally was a 32-year-old woman living in Lurgan, Northern Ireland. She was described as kind-hearted, passionate about human rights, and a devoted family member. She worked in marketing and advocacy, using her voice for causes she believed in. At the time of her death, she was 15 weeks pregnant, eagerly awaiting motherhood. She was known for her warm personality and her ability to bring people together. A strong advocate for equality and justice, Natalie actively participated in campaigns for women's rights and disability awareness. She had a strong social media presence where she voiced support for progressive causes, always striving to make the world a better place. Natalie's passion extended beyond activism. She was also a creative soul. She loved music, often attending local gigs and concerts. Friends recall her vibrant energy at these events, always singing along and spreading joy. She was also an avid reader, fascinated by true crime and mystery novels, an eerie coincidence given the way her life tragically ended. Her family, especially her parents and 3 brothers, were at the heart of her life. She shared a particularly close bond with her brothers, who often spoke about her unwavering support and love. She lived in her home in Silverwood Green, a quiet residential area where crime was a rare occurrence. To those who knew her, Natalie was full of promise and joy, making the circumstances of her death even more horrifying. She had recently shared the joyful news of her pregnancy with her family and friends. The excitement of becoming a mother was evident in her conversations as she eagerly planned for the arrival of her child. The nursery was slowly coming together, and she often spoke about her hopes and dreams for the future. Natalie was also deeply connected to her community, often volunteering her time to support local charities and initiatives. She believed in giving back, whether through fundraising efforts or simply offering a helping hand to those in need. Her compassion and drive to make a difference left a lasting impact on many people who crossed her path. Her love for animals was another defining aspect of her life. She had a deep affinity for pets, often rescuing stray animals and advocating for animal rights. Friends remember how she would go out of her way to help an injured or abandoned animal, treating them with the same kindness and empathy she showed to people. She was a woman of strong conviction, never afraid to stand up for what she believed in. Whether it was speaking out on social issues or defending those who were marginalized, Natalie approached life with a fierce sense of justice. Her ability to inspire others through her words and actions cemented her as a true force for good. Her loss was not only a personal tragedy for those who knew her, but also a loss for the larger community. The outpouring of grief following her death was overwhelming, with vigils held in her honor and calls for justice echoing throughout Northern Ireland. Her legacy as a kind, strong, and passionate woman remained, even as those left behind continued to seek answers and justice for her untimely passing. Even after her passing, her influence continues through the work of those who have been inspired by her advocacy. Her family and friends are committed to ensuring her story is not forgotten, turning their grief into action by pushing for change and awareness on the issues she held dear. Natalie McNally's name now stands as a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the importance of justice, and a beacon of the kindness she embodied throughout her life. What happened to Natalie McNally? On December 18th, 2022, Natalie McNally was found brutally murdered in her home in Lurgan, Northern Ireland. The discovery of her lifeless body sent shockwaves through the community, as the sheer brutality of the crime was almost unimaginable. Natalie had suffered multiple stab wounds, and the scene bore all the signs of a violent struggle. Her home, once a place of warmth and safety, had become the setting of an unspeakable horror. Investigators arriving at the scene were immediately confronted with disturbing details. Blood spatter patterns indicated a frenzied attack, one that suggested rage and a deeply personal motive. The defensive wounds on Natalie's hands and arms told a heartbreaking story. She had fought desperately for her life. Despite her efforts, the attack was relentless and merciless. She was found in a position that indicated she had attempted to escape her assailant, but was overpowered in her final moments. One of the most chilling aspects of the crime was the fact that there were no signs of forced entry. This led detectives to believe that Natalie had either known her attacker or had willingly let them into her home. Given that she was a cautious and independent woman, this realization intensified suspicions that the crime had been committed by someone close to her. As investigators combed through the scene, they noted that her belongings were largely undisturbed. There was no indication that robbery had been a motive. Nothing appeared to be missing. Her valuables remained untouched, and there were no signs of ransacking. This suggested a targeted attack, one focused solely on taking her life rather than any material gain. The most devastating revelation, however, was the fate of her unborn child. Natalie was 15 weeks pregnant at the time of her death, and she had been eagerly preparing for motherhood. She had spoken excitedly about her future, sharing her joy with family and friends. The murder of Natalie was not just the killing of a young woman. It was the erasure of a future she had already begun to build. Her baby, a life not yet lived, was also cruelly taken that night, making the crime even more unbearable. The sheer brutality and calculated nature of the attack painted a grim picture for detectives. This was not a random act of violence, it was a deliberate, premeditated killing. But who would want Natalie dead? And why? As authorities pieced together the puzzle, they would uncover a deception so intricate that it almost allowed the killer to walk free. Where did the crime take place? The murder of Natalie McNally took place in her own home in Silverwood Green, a quiet residential area in Lurgan, Northern Ireland. The neighborhood was considered peaceful, a place where families lived without fear, where crime was rare, and where the idea of such a brutal act seemed almost unimaginable. It was the kind of place where neighbors greeted each other in passing. Children played outside without concern, and the biggest worry for residents was typically something mundane. However, the illusion of safety in Silverwood Green was shattered on that fateful December night. Natalie's home, which had once been a sanctuary, became the site of a horrifying crime scene. When the police arrived, they were met with a grim reality. The front door showed no signs of forced entry, immediately raising a troubling question. Had Natalie willingly let her attacker in, or had she known them well enough to feel safe in their presence? Inside the house, the scene was one of chaos and terror. Blood spatter covered the walls, a silent testament to the struggle that had taken place. The positioning of furniture and objects in the room suggested a violent confrontation. Chairs knocked over, items displaced, a trail of destruction that indicated Natalie had fought desperately for her life. Defensive wounds on her arms confirmed she had tried to protect herself from the brutal attack, but the force used against her was overwhelming. The number and severity of stab wounds pointed to a crime driven by rage, not mere opportunism. This was not a burglary gone wrong. It was something deeply personal. For investigators, the crime scene provided disturbing clues. There was no evidence of a break-in, and nothing appeared to be stolen. Her phone, her purse, her valuables, they all remained untouched. This immediately ruled out robbery as a motive. The attack seemed targeted, deliberate, and methodical. It was a crime committed with intent, by someone who had come to ensure she did not leave that house alive. Another chilling detail added to the horror of the scene. Natalie was 15 weeks pregnant at the time of her murder. Her unborn child, whose life was just beginning, was also taken in this act of brutality. Police canvassed the area, speaking to neighbors, checking security footage, and trying to piece together a timeline of the crime. The realization that a murderer had walked through their streets undetected sent chills through the town. Some residents recalled seeing a suspicious figure on the night of the murder, while others struggled to believe that someone capable of such violence could have been living among them. The fear was palpable. Until the killer was caught, no one in Silverwood Green would sleep soundly again. When did the crime happen? Authorities determined that Natalie McNally was murdered sometime on the evening of December 18th, 2022. It was a cold winter night, and while the rest of Silverwood Green carried on with their normal routines, an unspeakable horror was unfolding inside her home. Her body was discovered later, sending shockwaves through the community. However, as investigators worked to pinpoint the exact timeline, they encountered a disturbing twist, one that made this case even more chilling. Natalie had been active on social media earlier that evening, engaging with posts and seemingly carrying on as usual. To friends and followers, nothing seemed amiss, but beneath this normality lurked something sinister. Investigators analyzed digital records, checking her last known online activity and communications. It appeared that someone had continued using her phone even after she had already been killed. This eerie discovery raised horrifying possibilities. Had the killer deliberately manipulated her phone to create a false timeline? Was this an attempt to mislead investigators and buy time for their escape? It was a calculated move, suggesting that the murderer was not only brutal but also methodical. This was not a crime of passion committed in a fit of rage. It was planned, executed, and covered up with chilling precision. Security footage from nearby houses and businesses became crucial in reconstructing the events of that night. Investigators scoured hours of video searching for any sign of movement in or out of Natalie's home. A shadowy figure was seen entering the area, but the footage was grainy and unclear, making identification difficult. Whoever this person was, they had taken great care to avoid detection. Neighbors reported hearing faint noises that night. Nothing alarming at the time, just slight disturbances that, in hindsight, may have been signs of the struggle that took place. Some recalled a car idling nearby, its engine humming in the quiet darkness, perhaps waiting for someone. All these fragments of information helped investigators create a timeline, but there were still gaps that the killer had expertly left behind. As investigators pieced together the night's events, one thing became certain. Natalie had been murdered in cold blood, and the killer had taken deliberate steps to cover their tracks. The timeline of the crime wasn't just about when she died. It was about how carefully her death was concealed, making it all the more terrifying. Why was Natalie McNally killed? As authorities delved deeper, a name surfaced, someone who had been in close contact with Natalie. He was seen as a person of interest, but something about his alibi didn't add up. He claimed to be live streaming a video game at the time of the murder, providing what seemed to be an ironclad virtual alibi. But digital evidence can be deceptive. When forensic analysts examined his online activity, they found discrepancies. The timestamps didn't match up perfectly, and soon a shocking revelation emerged. The live stream was pre-recorded. This meant one thing. While viewers believed he was engaging with them in real time, he was elsewhere. The question remained, was he with Natalie at the time of her murder? Investigators knew they had uncovered a crucial piece of the puzzle. If the suspect had faked an alibi, it suggested premeditation. This was not a crime of impulse, but one carefully planned. But the bigger question loomed. Why would someone go to such lengths to kill Natalie? One theory revolved around control and obsession. Was this someone who had wanted a relationship with Natalie, but had been rejected? Did anger and jealousy drive him to commit the ultimate act of violence? Investigators began dissecting past interactions, looking for any signs of escalating behavior, threats, or a sense of entitlement that may have led to this brutal act. Another possible motive involved secrecy. Did Natalie know something that put her in danger? Had she unknowingly uncovered something that someone was desperate to keep hidden? Some of her advocacy work involved standing up for causes she believed in. Could this have put her in the crosshairs of someone dangerous? There was also the chilling thought that her pregnancy played a role. Was the father of the child involved? Did someone see her unborn baby as a complication, an obstacle that had to be erased? If so, the crime took on an even more sinister dimension, one of calculated brutality. As investigators dug further, they knew that uncovering the killer's true motive would be key to understanding what really happened. The pre-recorded alibi was a bold and deceptive move, but it also showed desperation. A killer who goes to such lengths to cover their tracks is often someone who has much more to hide. How did investigators unravel the truth? Detectives turned their focus to surveillance footage and phone records. CCTV captured a man entering the vicinity of Natalie's home around the estimated time of her murder. Further analysis of digital data revealed that the suspect's phone had traveled to Lurgan and then back to his residence. But investigators needed more than just circumstantial evidence. They meticulously combed through Natalie's phone records, online activity, and communications. A pattern began to emerge, one that pointed directly to the suspect. Deleted messages, suspiciously timed calls, and inconsistencies in his statements further fueled their suspicions. As they traced his movements, forensic evidence provided the final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle. DNA recovered from the crime scene matched the suspect. Tiny traces, blood, fibers, and skin cells told the story of a struggle that had ended in murder. The virtual alibi that once seemed unshakable crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. Another breakthrough came when investigators examined the suspect's computer. Deep within the device's storage, they uncovered evidence of the pre-recorded live stream, with metadata showing it had been prepared well in advance. He had gone to great lengths to construct a digital lie, one that was supposed to keep him safe from suspicion. But technology, the very tool he had used to deceive, ultimately betrayed him. Interviews with those close to the suspect painted a chilling picture. Some recalled his unusual behavior in the days following Natalie's death, his demeanor, his inconsistent stories, and an unusual detachment. As the net closed around him, his confidence began to crack. The evidence was overwhelming, and there was nowhere left to hide. As detectives pieced together the puzzle, they also uncovered a disturbing history. The suspect had exhibited controlling behavior in past relationships, a red flag that now seemed glaringly obvious. Previous acquaintances came forward with accounts of his manipulative tendencies, reinforcing the profile investigators had constructed. It was clear that Natalie's murder was not a random act of violence, but a meticulously planned crime. Authorities also worked with digital forensics experts to recover deleted files and messages from the suspect's phone and computer. Hidden within encrypted folders were searches related to the crime, including disturbing queries about alibi creation and forensic countermeasures. He had studied how to evade law enforcement, but his research ultimately became more evidence against him. The suspect's timeline, once thought to be airtight, unraveled further when additional CCTV footage surfaced. Previously overlooked security cameras caught glimpses of him on a route that placed him closer to Natalie's home than he had originally claimed. The sequence of events became irrefutable, dismantling his defense piece by piece. With the weight of digital, forensic, and circumstantial evidence pressing down on him, the suspect finally broke. In a tense interrogation, confronted with the sheer volume of proof, he faltered. His story collapsed, and a partial confession followed. It was not an admission of guilt in its entirety, but it was enough to solidify the case against him. Natalie's case was no longer just a story of murder. It was a story of deception, premeditation, and a false sense of security provided by the digital world. The very technology that allowed him to craft an alibi also provided the key to unraveling the truth. And in the end, justice was served, not just for Natalie, but for the unborn child whose life was stolen before it even began. The trial that followed would bring further details to light, exposing the cold calculation behind the crime. The prosecution meticulously laid out the evidence, ensuring that the full extent of his actions was understood by all. The verdict, when it finally came, was met with relief and sorrow. Justice had been achieved, but at an unbearable cost. Natalie's legacy, however, would not be defined by the tragedy of her death, but by the strength of those who fought to uncover the truth and seek justice in her name. The tragic murder of Natalie McNally serves as a grim reminder that not everything we see online is reality. A virtual alibi may seem impenetrable, but the truth has a way of surfacing. As her family and community continue to seek justice, her story remains a cautionary tale about trust, digital manipulation, and the dark depths of deception. Natalie's case also highlights the critical role of technology in modern investigations. The same digital tools used to fabricate lies can become the very instruments that expose the truth. It is a stark warning that even the most meticulously crafted deception can unravel under scrutiny. Justice may not always be swift, but for those left behind, the fight for accountability never fades. Crazy story, right? If you want more jaw-dropping true crime cases, hit like, share with a friend, and subscribe so you don't miss a thing.